What if the earth itself is not silent but remembering? Beneath the shifting soil, beneath the stone foundations of mountains, beneath the deep and endless ocean floor, there may be records, not written in ink or carved in clay, but pressed into mineral lattices, into isotope ratios, into the long arithmetic of erosion and decay. We cannot ask the earth a question in words, but perhaps every time we touch its rocks or measure its sediments, it whispers back something older than language, older than us. When we think of memory, we imagine our own fragile threads of feeling and image, slipping often blurred with time. But does the planet hold its own version of memory? Could the shape of a coastline, eroded by waves, be not just random, but a sentence drafted slowly across millennia? Could the chemistry of trapped bubbles in ice sheets be more than data? Could they be the breath of vanished lives, the forgotten air of a people that left no other trace behind? Science gives us ways to see these buried whispers. Geology is a kind of translation, fossils a kind of alphabet, isotopes a kind of accent from an era we can never travel to. Think of how carbon decays predictably, slowly ticking like a metronome through time. When we measure carbon, or uranium, or lead, we hear not only the story of physics, but perhaps the ghostly rhythm of civilizations erased long before our records began. It becomes tempting to wonder, could memory embedded in stone belong not only to Earth's shifting crust, but to something purposeful that walked upon it? Our own world has nearly forgotten entire chapters of its story at the edges of deserts. Civilizations we once thought eternal disappeared beneath drifting sand. In humid jungles, stone pyramids were claimed by vines, their symmetry dissolved into tangled green. And yet these are the civilizations we do know, the ones our written memory has managed to recover. Beyond them lies another abyss, the abyss of deep time, where human memory cannot follow. There, between layers of basalt and shale, lie hundreds of millions of years of silence. Is it so impossible to ask whether something might have dwelled there too? Something not human, or something human before we imagine humanity began? The sediment layers are vast, eras long enough for entire peoples to rise and fall, to build and vanish, with nothing but their ruins folded into ocean trenches or ground to dust by glaciers that swept continents clean. How many dreams could exist in the geological pauses between extinctions? How many times has Earth reset her stage, leaving behind only the vaguest hint of what stood before? We know that fossils form in silence, when bone is slowly replaced by minerals, becoming heavy with stone's patience. Imagine if culture could fossilize in this way, an idea turned into crystalline echo, a tool preserved not in use but in chemistry. There are moments, examining odd mineral veins or impossible formations, where the mind hesitates. Is this merely the fingerprint of nature's whim, or could it be something else entirely? A message so weathered and tired that we only perceive its shadow? Maybe the earth does not prefer to speak clearly. Memory here is not linear, not like paragraphs stacked in a book. It comes as fragments, scattered, carried by rivers from mountain top to ocean trench. Every fragment relocated out of place, a nail-shaped fossil in sediment predating nails, a perfectly straight fracture line in sandstone that should never fracture so straight. Scientists explain these through processes we know: compression, chance, coincidence, and perhaps that is enough. But perhaps there is more, that faint tug at the edges of certainty, that sense that something is missing from the story geology tells. And so we walk quietly among stone outcrops and dried seas, listening without expecting answers. We are like dreamers pulling fragments from the dark, shapes half recognized, voices half remembered. Time itself erodes clarity, leaving us to fill the gaps with wonder. What if every gap is an invitation? What if absence is itself a kind of presence, an unfinished sentence waiting for us to lean closer, to notice? Perhaps this forgetting is not failure, but design. If too much was remembered, there would be no room for discovery, no reason for awe. Earth hides her past, not to deny it, but to let us sense its vastness. Every isotope we measure, every layer we peel back is a reminder of how much has slipped beyond our reach. We live always in the shallows of time, while below us stretches an unfathomable ocean of stories unspoken, civilizations unnamed, epochs unread. And yet we ask, we keep asking, for it is in our nature to wonder whether we are alone, not just now, but across all of time. Are we the first thinkers upon this planet? Or could we be late arrivals to a stage swept clean again and again, where others performed their brief, bright dramas before being erased by flood, by fire, by ice? The earth remembers in ways we cannot, folding each trace gently into her endless archive. Whether those traces are only mountains and seas, or something more, is a secret she has not yet chosen to yield. And still we listen patiently between the breaths of stone, waiting for meaning in the echoes. And if the earth can remember through stone and silence, then perhaps stones themselves have a patience more profound than we know. Perhaps, as we move deeper in this journey, the rocks beneath us will reveal how they have carried memory longer than any living being could. And so we turn toward them, listening. For the stones have been waiting. The stones have been waiting. That is what we feel when we pause long enough at a cliff face, or walk across a desert floor where rounded pebbles glow in evening light. Unlike us, stones do not hurry. They are not driven by memory or fear of forgetting. They carry their time differently, as though each mineral grain were a diary written at a speed too slow for us to read. And yet if we stay very still, the patience of stone begins to whisper. To us, centuries sound infinite. To a mountain ridge worn grain by grain, centuries are only stray seconds. What has eroded in the blink of 1,000 years may be, to the granite beneath, hardly movement at all. Geologists remind us that quartz, feldspar and mica were born in fire, cooled under pressure, and then folded upwards into daylight through tectonic heaving. Every fragment of rock on Earth has already travelled further, and waited longer than we ever will. Stones embody not just patience but endurance, the endurance of matter itself, persisting as empires rise and rivers drain away. Sometimes patience means silence. Fossils hide inside shale for millions of years, patiently awaiting exposure when a storm or a curious hand splits them open. A plant frozen in mineral form, a shell preserved in limestone. They remind us that even what seems fragile can outwait destruction if stone adopts it as one of its own. Could it be that civilizations too might have been folded into this patience, absorbed not as ruins to be seen with ease, but as subtle inclusions, tiny anomalies in iron concentrations, delicate shifts in isotopic patterns? We tend to trust what is visible, forgetting that most of Earth's patience lies hidden beneath. Beneath our feet, slab after slab of crust vanishes into subduction zones, carried into the mantle and remelted. Entire landscapes, entire archives of stone memory sink and are rewritten as magma, never to be seen again. It is a brutal patience, not calm but inevitable, where what once was is sacrificed to form something else. If an ancient civilization had laid its cities across such a region, the earth might have folded them utterly into itself, leaving not ruins, not even bones, but only altered chemistry waiting millions of years later in cooled volcanic rock. And still, patience reshapes. The wind, carrying only dust, cuts soft patterns into sandstone. The sea dissolves cliffs, grain by grain. A human wall may crumble to rubble in centuries, but the canyon shaped by currents over 40 million years becomes something close to eternal. Perhaps this is why stones humble us. They are the measure against which our speed, our urgency, our briefness is revealed. To a stone, we are nothing more than a spark, lit and gone before it feels the weight of even a shallow scar. But patience is not emptiness. The patterns we see in granite intrusions, the aligned crystals in metamorphic rock, the rhythmic layering of sediment, each is a memory trace, repeating itself across endless expanses. It is impossible not to wonder, do these rhythms only reflect geological necessity, or something else? a deeper order, superimposed from a time we cannot access. Some call this wishful, others call it curiosity. Stones ask no questions, and yet they provoke them endlessly within us. We walk across cobblestones in ancient towns and feel history underfoot. But what of the stones beneath those cobblestones? Stones that waited for billions of years before being carved by human hands. Their patience dwarfs our history. They remind us that, long before cities, long before words, there were rocks cooling beneath stars, keeping records of pressures and temperatures no mind had yet considered. Long after us they will still be here, though perhaps altered, folded into mountains yet to rise. Maybe what captivates us is not merely stone itself, but what it represents, the evidence that time can be endured. To see cliffs is to confront survival beyond story, beyond record, beyond civilization. And when we reach out and touch cold granite, maybe we are hoping to borrow just a trace of that patience, a sense that even in forgetting, something endures, not because rock cares for us, but because rock does not care at all, and by not caring it remains. And still we ask, if rock can record seas, extinctions and firestorms, why not also the faint signatures of civilization long gone? If patience always wins, then traces, however faint, must exist, nestled inside its stillness, waiting for us to learn how to read them. And yet, if patience preserves so much, why does it also erase? For every fossil discovered, countless more are lost to erosion, to burial, to silence. In patience there is both presence and absence, memory and forgetting interwoven. Perhaps that is Earth's quiet paradox, that in the patience of stones we learn that most stories are carried but never told. And if that is true, it leads us gently onward to search not just for patience, but for patterns, those rare harmonies inside the geologic record that make us wonder, could this be more than chance? Could this be the whisper of intention? Within the patience of stones, patterns begin to emerge. At first they seem like nothing more than the tidy layers of sediment, gentle bands of colour stretching across canyon walls, spiralling through marble quarries, or marking fossils pressed flat against ancient shale. Patterns remind us that time does not lie in chaos alone, but in rhythm. Rivers flood, then retreat, glaciers grind, then recede, volcanoes roar and fall silent, and the earth lays these records down carefully, one atop another. To a casual glance, the layers are simply beautiful. To those who study them, they are the slow script of the planet's memory. And yet, just as in human writing, there are places where the lettering falters, unfamiliar symbols appear, enigmatic line breaks occur. Geologists often describe anomalies, unusual concentrations of minerals, misplaced isotopes, fractures that run straight as though drawn with intent, circular impressions deep in stone where chance alone seems unsatisfying as an answer. Science approaches these patiently, testing, retesting, measuring and explaining most as natural variation, the quirky accidents of heat, pressure or sediment flow. But still, some features catch the imagination. Could every unusual shape be dismissed so easily? Or might a few belong not only to nature's slow brush, but to the touch of hands and minds we no longer recognize? Imagine peeling back vast slices of rock, a cliff exposed by river erosion, an ocean floor revealed by sonar. In the middle of these sweeping natural pages, a precision-etched line appears, sharper than expected, aligned more cleanly than tectonic stresses alone seem to allow. A pair of parallel scars running for endless kilometers, a block of sandstone fractured almost as though it had once been carved. Perhaps coincidence explains it. Perhaps. But patterns ask for our attention, because they repeat. A single line is anomaly, a rhythm of lines is language, and in deep time the presence of rhythm always beckons us to look closer. Consider how isotopes tell their stories. Excess carbon-14 indicates floods of organic death. Spikes in iridium signal asteroid strikes. Traces of plutonium locked into glacial ice reveal the shadow of modern weapons testing. These are chemical memories, precise enough to mark both extinction and invention. Yet scattered among them are unexplained signatures, chemical spikes that do not perfectly align with volcanic events, isotope ratios that whisper of changes we cannot fully plot. The record feels like music with missing notes, songs for which the main melody has been erased. Did the gaps mark accidents of measurement, or could they conceal moments when Earth itself bore witness to more than natural force? We must be cautious as we wonder. Most shapes are illusions of pattern-seeking minds. Psychology teaches us about pareidolia, our tendency to see faces in clouds, hands in roots, purpose in randomness. And yet, sometimes even illusions reveal something important. Our eyes may invent connections, but what if, in a few rare cases, the connections are real? What if those faces in the stone were not entirely accidents, but symbols, buildings, or tools smoothed by erosion until recognition hovers at the edge of possibility? There is a restlessness felt by those who linger too long inside canyon walls or limestone quarries. The layers seem too orderly, too insistent, like a message not meant for us yet, impossible to ignore. A geologist may classify the strata, trace it back to ancient oceans, describe the compression cycles, but there are some who whisper quietly, what if this neatness is more than the patience of stone? What if it remembers an influence, unnatural floods, unnatural fires, shaped not by wind or water alone, but by civilizations gone invisible? We long for symmetry, and in rock we find it again and again, honeycomb weathering, polygonal cracks across dried mudstone, basalt columns forming tidy hexagons. Science explains these as physical processes, repeating equations of physics across scale and material, and yet even Einstein admitted there is mystery in why nature chooses certain geometries at all. Could repeated combinations of heat and pressure carve shapes so strangely architectural that we hesitate at first glance? Could we be misreading a colonnade as geology, a wall as a seam? Perhaps the deeper question lies not in proof but in perception. To hold a stone is to hold a memory written without words. Yet our human longing shapes how we read it. If we see faces in cliffs, stairways in plateaus, harmony in chaotic fractures, does that say more about the stone or about us? Maybe what matters is not the answer, but the persistence of the question. For questions themselves are patterns, repeating endlessly, handed from each generation of thinkers to the next, borne along like fossils of doubt preserved in thought. Still, patterns draw us on. The stone remembers, but not always in silence. Sometimes its lines and layers shout to us across epochs, insisting that someone, something left their mark. And while eroded by time, softened by entropy, near erased by deep cycles of burial and rebirth, these marks still stir in us a haunting thought. Could it be that within every canyon, every cliff, every cross-section of rock, we stand not only before Earth's story of oceans and fires, but before ghost writings of an intelligence erased too fully for clear recognition? Is it possible that the most ordinary seeming features are fragments of a language older than ours, preserved without meaning left to guide us? And so as we follow the faint repetition of patterns, we find ourselves caught between certainty and wonder. The geologic explanation always suffices, and yet the echo lingers, the echo that invites us to pause, to run our hands along stone that has outlasted 10,000 lives, and to wonder whether its patterns are telling us something more. And if the layers can carry such secrets in their rhythm, then what of the silences between them, the interrupts, the gaps in the record where nothing seems to remain? Could disappearance be as meaningful as presence? Could forgetting itself be patterned too? Between the layers of stone there are gaps wide enough to swallow entire chapters of Earth's story. We call them extinction events, moments when life faltered so completely that the world itself forgot how to continue in the same way. In the record of fossils, extinctions appear like torn pages, like silence between notes of music. They remind us that just as rock preserves, it also erases, and in that erasure, mystery deepens. The end Permian extinction, when almost all life slipped away, the sudden darkness of the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs, the icy devastations, the fiery floods of basalt that stretched for thousands of kilometers, staining entire epochs with ash. Each event was not simply destruction, but a vast resetting of the stage, a pause deep and heavy in the continuity of time. What worlds might have fit in the pauses? What lives might have thrived in the spaces now forever blank? Extinction is not quiet to those who live within it, to the trilobites staring from shallow seas, to the forests choking under volcanic gas. It was chaos and suffocation, not silence. But to us, who can only look back across millions of years, extinction feels like stillness, an interval where Earth itself lowered its voice. Fossil records thin out, isotopes skew in strange directions, entire branches of life vanish as though they never were. Silence in the archive, silence in the memory, and once silence has entered, how can we ever be certain what has been lost? Is it possible that in one of these immense voids hidden between extinctions, something rose that we cannot easily classify? A civilization not marked by familiar fossils of bone or shell, but by subtler traces, chemistries, structures, patterns that vanished alongside the rest when the world convulsed. Maybe they lasted a moment. Maybe they endured for millions of years but were folded under by tectonic plates, consumed by oceans, erased as magma rewrote the chapter. In science, we track extinctions through isotopic anomalies, carbon levels leaping, oxygen ratios skewed, iridium scattered like a faint metallic fingerprint across strata. These are the signatures not of individuals, but of event. They tell us that something tremendous happened, and yet they cannot always tell us what or who was caught inside the wave. The silence of extinction does not discriminate between the ordinary and the extraordinary. It covers equally. Whatever civilization, whatever unknown intelligence might have existed, would be written over with the same blank ink as trilobites and fern forests. And yet not everything vanishes. Coral reefs reappear after millions of years. New kinds of creatures replace the old, forests reroute themselves across bare plains. Extinction in one sense is not an ending but a transformation, but it is also a forgetting. If an unknown civilization existed before one of these great curtains of silence, only fragments too faint to name might survive. An unusual mineral deposit, a misplaced shard of carbon lattice, a sliver of geometry hidden in a canyon wall. Not evidence strong enough for certainty, but enough perhaps to stir the suspicion that the silence hides more than it reveals. Sometimes, in ice cores and ocean sediments, we measure great absences. Microscopic shells that once flourished vanish from the record in an instant. Species disappear from rung after rung of the evolutionary ladder. The gaps gape at us like open mouths, voiceless but insistent, demanding we acknowledge how fragile memory truly is. If the biotic memory of Earth can collapse so completely, why not the memory of culture, the memory of civilization? Silence, though, is not nothing. Silence is a presence, thick and weighted. When we stare into extinction's blankness, we confront the strange truth that forgetting may shape the planet as much as remembering. What if the very absence of evidence is a kind of signal, reminding us that survival is not guaranteed, that stories can be unmade as swiftly as they are written? To find silence is to find the edge of our knowing. Beyond it, we can only imagine. And so we lie awake with the thought how many civilizations, how many possible histories might have been buried in these long dark pauses. Could one exist entirely out of reach, erased with such completeness that only the shape of absence itself remains, like a shadow against stone? Extinctions clean the slate, and yet they never leave it perfectly blank. In every silence, a residue waits. Traces we do not yet recognize, clues that entice us to keep looking, to keep wondering. Perhaps what is lost is not gone, but translated into a language of absence, a silence written into the very rocks that outweighted the vanishing. And if entire worlds can disappear beneath extinction's curtain, then what of memory itself? What, truly, does it mean to lose not simply a species but a way of being, a knowledge, a wisdom? How far back must we peer? How deep must we listen to ask, what else lies buried in silence we have not yet learned how to read? From the silence of extinction we wander toward a subtler question. If bones can become stone, if shells can transform into fossils pressed within cliffs, then what of thought? What of the invisible architectures of mind, the tools we create, the sparks of invention, the delicate webs of culture? Could these too, in some way beyond metaphor, become fossils? Could an idea itself find a way to endure long after both the thinker and the civilizations that sheltered it have disappeared? We know that fossils form through replacement and persistence. A living form must first be buried quickly to avoid decay, then minerals slowly seep in, replacing flesh and hollow spaces with stone. Over time, what once was fragile becomes almost eternal. An ammonite shell cradled in a piece of limestone, a fern leaf impressed into shale, even the marks of raindrops hardened into surface crust. Each fossil is a gesture of preservation, a refusal of complete forgetting, and it invites the fantasy that thoughts like bones might seek similar refuge. Consider fire. In the record of human history, the hearth is not preserved as flame, but in charcoal, burnt stone, and ash. We do not inherit the warmth itself, but its residue says, someone somewhere knew how to hold light. Could an ancient civilization long before us have seeded the earth not with words, but with material echoes of their thinking, strange alloys embedded where they should not be, patterns carved not for worship or shelter, but as expressions of knowledge? Would we recognize these as fossils of thought, or would we catalogue them away as natural curiosities, folded invisibly into geology's broader story? There are hints already. In Greenland's rocks, scientists uncovered ancient banded iron formations, striped layers testifying to photosynthesis billions of years ago. The patterns are not art, but they are testimony. They show that microbes once shifted the chemistry of oceans so profoundly that stone itself recorded the event. Life left a fingerprint through chemistry, not architecture. In that sense, even a microbe performed a small act of intellectual fossilization. It changed the world's conditions, and the world remembered. Now imagine not just microbes, but minds. Imagine a civilization rerouting rivers, forging tools, shaping metals that would then mingle with sediment and endure as anomalous deposits. Over vast time, the meaning collapses. The tools themselves disintegrate, but their presence lingers as unexplained density of copper here, unusual trace of nickel there. Scientists debate the anomaly. They assign hypotheses. And yet faintly in the stone itself may lie the fossil of an idea, of curiosity, of invention, of deliberate transformation, a trace not random but purposeful, long after purpose itself is unknowable. Perhaps even the act of extinction is itself a record. If an ancient civilization burned, mined, or shifted the earth, would its impact leave a scar visible as a spike in isotopes, as a thin layer of soot, as a sudden bloom of rare minerals otherwise absent? Wouldn't that, in essence, be the fossil of their culture, the transformed residue of their interaction with the planet? In our own time, scientists have already spoken of the techno-fossil, future traces of plastic, concrete, synthetic alloys left behind for whatever might come after us. If this is true of us, why not of another, long before? And yet there remains the question of recognition. A shell is obvious, its curves familiar across aeons, but a fossil of thought might not speak so clearly. It would be hidden in difference, a pattern nature would not ordinarily make, a curiosity awaiting someone to notice. The doubt is always there. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps coincidence is enough to explain. But still the mind lingers. The need to wonder is itself human fossilization. Thought layered on thought, each generation leaving behind a question rather than an answer. Ideas, unlike bones, are fragile in another way. They migrate. A thought can live without its host, carried through teaching, practice, replication. Could it be that somehow, over deep time, an idea could leap across extinctions, preserved not in stone but in form, math rediscovered, geometry echoed, tools reinvented again and again? Perhaps the echo of an ancient, unfossilized idea is alive inside us now, repeating unconsciously through our hands and designs, as though memory never truly disappears, only disguises itself. And so the earth may hold not only the fossils of bodies, but the fossils of intention, a broken symmetry here, an inexplicable alloy there, the mark of a lost hand weathered almost to invisibility. The stone remains patient. It does not insist on clarity, but somewhere in its deep pages, the faint imprints of forgotten thought might still be waiting to be recognized. We cannot yet name them, perhaps we never will, but the very act of entertaining this possibility, that a civilization's ideas could fossilize, even imperfectly, is itself an idea that may one day linger for someone else. For thought too has its sediment, layering slowly, carried forward in imagination, pressed deeper with each asking, what if questions themselves are fossils, left behind in the silences of time? And if an idea can fossilize, then perhaps we must search landscapes differently, not just for shells or bones, but for whispers, subtle geometries, disrupted chemistries, improbable remnants. For inside them may lie something stranger than mere life's endurance, the memory of intelligence itself. If an idea can fossilize in traces of stone, then what of entire structures, entire architectures of thought and hand? When the earth is patient enough to keep bones for millions of years, could it not also disguise the remnants of walls, vaults, and stairways? We walk past cliffs, mesas, and buttes, and think them wholly natural, works of wind and water. Yet sometimes, standing at the edge of a desert canyon or beneath a towering plateau, a strange question lingers: are we looking at the artistry of erosion, or at ruins so eroded they have become indistinguishable from nature itself? Wind is a sculptor beyond compare. Grain by grain, it carves columns, arches, and windows into sandstone. Water runs with equal artistry, tracing channels, slicing valleys, smoothing boulders into perfect spheres. The results look like architecture, deliberate and uncanny, a cathedral ceiling deep in a cavern, a colonnade of basalt columns formed by cooling lava, a terrace of layered steps beside an ancient lake. Science explains every curve, every line, every shape with the language of physics, erosion, crystallization, cooling rates, and weathering. And yet the mind hesitates, for the resemblance to human creation is too striking at times, too persistent. Why should nature so often echo the shape of structures we ourselves would build? Perhaps the echo is coincidence. Perhaps it is our eyes creating meaning where none exists. But what if the mirroring is because once, long ago, structures truly stood here? Not temples as we imagined them, not houses or walls in our familiar sense, perhaps something far older, shaped by a civilization whose designs aligned with the same physics nature uses today. Over time, floods swept in, winds howled, deserts shifted, stones broke apart, scars softened, edges blurred. The ruins became landscapes, absorbed slowly into geology's patient canvas until nature and culture, ruin and erosion became one. Geologists show us how entire mountain ranges can vanish, given enough time. Peaks once taller than Everest have been worn down into smooth hills. Valleys once sharp are now shallow plains. If stone mountains themselves can be erased, imagine what would happen to walls and towers left untended for millions of years. Would they vanish entirely, or would they dissolve into ghost forms, patterns of symmetry, alignments of fracture, shapes too stubborn to vanish completely, yet too weathered to remain clear? In the American Southwest, canyon walls rise in layers like masonry, their red and ochre strata resembling bricks laid carefully by some enormous hand. In Turkey's Cappadocia, tall stone spires look almost like towers, their hollows and windows suggestive of upper stories. In Bolivia's high altitudes, Natural terraces descend down slopes like giant staircases. All are geological, yet all trigger the same unsettling sense. What if erosion is not merely mimicry, but camouflage, concealing structures whose stories dissolved into silence? Science, again, is cautious, and rightly so. Basalt columns are formed by cooling fractures. Sandstone arches form through wind pressure exploiting weak joints. Step-like terraces form as rivers cut back layers of rock at different rates of hardness. There is elegance in these explanations, beauty in how time alone can sculpt what appears so deliberate. But recognition, too, is powerful. The lines between natural artistry and forgotten architecture blur, leaving us to stand in soft doubt, gazing not at answers but at possibilities. Perhaps the greatest ruins are not those built by known civilizations, but those hidden in plain sight, mistaken as landscape itself. If an ancient people worked with stone on a scale beyond comprehension, perhaps only erosion remains to tell the tale, its patterns cloaking the truth until both forms, nature's work and human design, are indistinguishable. Would we then know we were walking through ruins? Or would cliffs and ridges continue to feel to us like mere wilderness, background to history rather than history itself? Ruins, when young, are easy to recognize. Broken stairways still climb, walls still align. But after thousands of years, ivy covers them, rivers fill them, forests scatter them. After millions of years, pressure compacts them, glaciers abrade them, entropy consumes them. What remains is not wall but cliff, not road but valley, not chamber but cavern, and so true ruins, the ruins of unimaginable age, hide not as ruins at all, but as erosion. Yet something in us resists full erasure. We look with searching eyes for alignment, for geometry, for any hint of design. Sometimes the act of wondering itself is enough. The suspicion that this canyon or that mesa is more than it appears, that our sense of ruins is not entirely misled, but is memory stirring faintly, a near-forgotten echo. Maybe this is why landscapes haunt us, because stone shaped by erosion always wears two masks, one as nature's infinite patience, and the other as the possible bones of some unknown creation. To wander among them is to walk the threshold, unsure which face we are truly seeing. And if nature's art and lost ruins can be indistinguishable, then perhaps our search must also expand. We must listen not only to shapes, but to absences, the missing pieces, the silences within the land. For sometimes it is not what erosion leaves behind that matters most, but what it erases. The question then is quiet and unsettling. How many ruins might already surround us, disguised forever as cliff or stone or hill? How often do we walk among forgotten corridors, never knowing they exist? And if that is possible, if so much can be hidden within erosion, then how much more may lie beneath the places no eye can see, deep beneath oceans where the silence is thicker still? If erosion can disguise ruins as mountains and valleys, what then of the sea? For the ocean is the greatest eraser, the most patient shroud. Coastlines shift, water rises and falls, and entire worlds vanish beneath salt and tide. What once was land becomes seafloor, drowned in sediment, clothed in coral, its story muffled by leagues of silence. Erosion may blur a wall to a cliff, but drowning can erase a city entirely from human sight. Beneath the oceans, history may not simply be forgotten, it may be buried alive. Scientists tell us that during the last great ice age, sea levels stood more than 100 meters lower, where waves now move restlessly. Entire plains once stretched wide, feeding animals and sheltering early people. The English Channel was once a forested valley. Beringia, now beneath the Arctic seas, was once a bridge across continents. Sunderland, between today's Indonesia and Malaysia, was once a wide, fertile land where rivers braided into shallow deltas. These are worlds we can still imagine, for traces remain in core samples and sonar maps, but go deeper in time, farther back in sea rise and fall, and land after land erases itself beyond recall. How many coastlines have come and gone? How many structures, villages, or entire civilizations could lie beneath waves, hidden beyond sight? The ocean floor is not empty. Its mud and silt record stories in secret. Sediments accumulate layer upon layer, preserving pollen, dust, volcanic ash, even microscopic shells that tell us about climates long gone. When researchers probe these cores, they find not only natural events but human ones too. Soot from ancient fires, metals from industry, fallout from our modern technologies. If our mark can sink and remain in sediments in just a few thousand years, then perhaps another's mark, another people's trace, might wait further down, obscured in silt, so old we hesitate to call it memory. Could there be echoes there, faint patterns of civilization entombed in deep marine archives? There are places that tempt us with questions. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Formation stares from beneath the waves, terraces sharp as steps, faces carved by water that look suspiciously like walls and corridors. Scientists debate, are these only natural sandstone formations, fractured just so by tectonic cracks, or were they shaped by hands long forgotten, now softened by tides and time into half nature, half design? The question lingers because the sea preserves by concealing. Even deliberate structures once submerged soon grow cloaked in coral reefs, mistaken for geology itself. Could countless such echoes rest unseen, far deeper, where no diver has ever shone a light? Technology helps us listen. Sonar pulses and satellite altimetry map the hidden worlds of seabeds. They show us mid-ocean ridges stretching like vast scars, trenches gouged deeper than Everest is tall, submerged volcanoes rising like lost mountains. Among them are strange anomalies, shapes square when nature tends toward curves, grid lines etched in sediments as though drawn. Most are explained quickly, artifacts of data stitching, illusions of scale, but some remain ambiguous, teasing, unresolved. The sea floor may not easily yield its secrets, but it is vast enough to hold them all. And then there is subduction. Entire plates of ocean crust slide down beneath continents, plunging cities, if they ever existed, into the molten mantle to be recycled as new rock. In those slow collisions, whole landscapes vanish utterly, without fossil or trace. What civilizations, if any, could survive such erasure? What languages could withstand burial in magma? None that we know. And yet, subduction is not total emptiness. It howls with earthquakes, breathes ash skyward, leaves chemical trails in isotopes that become the language geologists raid. Could it be possible that if entire worlds had once existed near such gulfs, their disappearance might still faintly haunt the chemical rhythms of today's rocks? Even the silence of the deep ocean speaks. Sound travels far beneath the surface, reverberating along thermoclines, echoing for hundreds of miles. Whales communicate across vast distances, ships leave signatures, even earthquakes send low rumbles through the abyss. If voices carry there today, could voices have carried there long ago? Perhaps not voices like ours, but signals of construction, of machinery, of intention. And though the sea has hushed them, maybe the sediments hold a memory, waiting like an old tape to be dusted and replayed in forms we do not yet understand. When we think of the seafloor, most of us imagine silence unimaginable, darkness, pressure, quiet beyond hearing. But silence is not nothingness. It is a fullness, a density, a cloak. Within that cloak may lie all the ruins time has chosen not to reveal, whole coastlines swallowed and forgotten, all their patterns pressed into mud. If extinction blinds us on land, then drowning blinds us doubly, erasing both view and access. And so we wonder, does the ocean hold not just fish and mystery, but memory? Could it be that the deepest trenches are not only scars of tectonics, but tombs of histories unknowable? Do we swim always above forgotten landscapes we will never walk, never measure, never name? Perhaps the truth lies in the echo. The sea always gives back. Throw a sound into its depths, and it returns stretched and softened, changing shape but never truly gone. The ocean remembers through reverberation, even if it cannot retell clearly what caused the sound. Could the seafloor itself do the same, sending us echoes in stone and silence, asking us only to listen more carefully? And if echoes can linger in the sea, then so too can traces linger in decay itself. For what slips beneath waves does not always stay beneath. It can resurface, borne up by the tireless work of entropy. And so we turn next, with slow breath, to see how loss and wearing down may in themselves be a kind of strange artistry. Entropy is often spoken of as loss, as collapse, as the slow undoing of order, and yet when we look closely, we see its touch everywhere, not only dismantling but creating, not only devouring but reshaping. The fractured cliff, the cracked river delta, the rust blooming on old iron, all are the artwork of entropy, subtle and unplanned, yet strangely beautiful. It does not compose with intention, but with inevitability. And sometimes that inevitability produces not chaos, but patterns so haunting that we cannot help but mistake them for deliberate. What once stood tall wears down, marble statues dissolve into weathered ghosts, fortresses crumble, their stones slipping back into the soil. Even mountains, those giants of geology, are only temporary, their ridges bowing to wind and water until they flatten into plains. It is entropy's hand in slow motion, a hand that takes away sharpness and pride, but in return leaves shapes as quiet as riverbeds, as flowing as dunes, as vast and ageless as deserts. In its own language, entropy too is an artist. Consider fossils. Without entropy, the breaking of bone, the decay of flesh, the collapse of cell structure, there would be nothing to mineralize. It is destruction that allows preservation. In the same way, a landslide may bury a valley, erasing its present, yet by sealing it off from air and light it unknowingly saves its memory for millions of years. Entropy plays both sides, eroding with one hand while archiving with the other. Perhaps some of the signatures we puzzle over in rocks, the sudden chemical irregularities, the odd fractures, are not ruins left by peoples unknown, but the strange artistry of entropy shaping matter into imitation. And yet, could the reverse also be true? Could ruins we dismiss as entropy's quiet work actually be something left behind that only entropy disguised? A staircase worn into indistinct terraces, a carving smoothed until it seems like natural striation, a wall crumbled until it matches a cliff. It is as though entropy is both curator and thief, the one who decides what remains recognizable and what vanishes into anonymity. Geology confirms this duality. Rocks fracture according to laws of stress. But those fractures can look architectural. Caverns widen into halls, but the halls resemble chambers. Salt crystals grow in grids so perfect they look engineered, and always entropy hums in the background, wearing away strict lines while at the same time planting illusions of design. Is this artistry entirely blind, or is there something more mysterious in the way time's erasures mimic intention so beautifully? Look at rust. On ships long abandoned, steel blooms with reds and oranges more vivid than paint. Patterns spread across the hull, as if some brush had been dipped in fire. Left to itself, iron does not return only to dust. It writes a tapestry first. Or, look at glaciers grinding mountains. The scars they cut are not random but flowing, almost calligraphic, as though over 1,000,000 years of effort the ice was trying to write something across stone. What if the creative hand of entropy is not only illusion but a universal rhythm, one that civilizations inevitably join when they too are undone? Consider our own world. Someday in deep time, skyscrapers fallen, their metal bones oxidized, their glass ground by sand into new quartz, plastics softened into sediments, nuclear isotopes decaying into stable whispers in soil. Would not all of this, our architectures, our artifacts, our very being, become the subject of entropy's canvas? Shapes erased, meanings dissolved, but traces remaining in altered form, in echoes and suggestions. A geologist millions of years forward might puzzle over a mineral alignment here, an unusual isotopic ratio there, and never know it was us. In that sense, entropy is already rehearsing the memory of our forgetting. And so when we see order where there should only be disarray, when erosion produces balance, when fractures align too neatly, we are faced with a question. Did someone's hand draw this, long ago, only for entropy to finish the work, softening intention into nature? Or is entropy itself so patterned, so strangely elegant, that its artwork forever tempts us into recognizing meaning that isn't there? The truth is uncertain, but perhaps uncertainty itself is part of the artistry. Entropy ensures that we can never see the past with perfect clarity, only through veils of erasure, always half imagining the origin, and in that way it forces us to dwell in wonder, to search deeper, to keep asking what lies beneath the silence, beneath the pattern, beneath the ruin. And if entropy's hand can mimic memory so convincingly, then maybe the faintest signals, the ones embedded not in form but in chemistry, invisible to the eye, are the truest archives. Perhaps it is there, in isotopes and subtle signatures, that the whispers of vanished worlds survive. And so, from the artistry of ruin, we turn next to the hidden calculus of atoms themselves, where silence and signal blur into one. If entropy paints its patterns in ruin's slow dissolving, then isotopes are the hidden script beneath. Every atom tells a story, every variation of weight and decay, a syllable in the language of deep time. To us, isotopes are not just chemistry, they are memory written in numbers, captured in ratios that shift with every fire, every ocean swell, every breath of atmosphere that changes the balance of the world. Carbon remembers growth and life. Oxygen remembers the heat of climate, its isotopes shifting when ice covers the poles or when oceans warm in ancient summers. Strontium marks the movement of rivers through stone, whispering where water once flowed. Even uranium, locked deep in minerals, diminishes itself predictably, measuring the slow passage of eons. In each case, the Earth is keeping a record not with words, not with images, but with the invisible adjustments of its atoms. A memory too quiet for the eye, but not for the patient ear of science. In the Greenland ice sheet, tiny bubbles of air hold the carbon dioxide of vanished atmospheres. Ratios reveal how forests once blanketed continents, how industry in our own era carved sudden spikes into the long calm of carbon's line. In corals, the oxygen balance layers itself like tree rings, whispering the story of monsoon rains thousands of years before the first city stones were laid. These signals are precise, undeniable, and enduring. They remind us that even when everything living has dissolved, the atoms remain, still speaking, long after the tongues that exhaled them are gone. And yet, some signals resist explanation. Across rock layers millions of years old, there are sudden surges, anomalous concentrations of metals, isotopes, bending against expectation. Some we can link to volcanic cataclysms, others to asteroid impacts. But still there are residue lines that puzzle geologists, chemical murmurs whose origin is not neatly matched to disaster alone. Could these not also carry the echoes of something unimagined, a civilization that transformed its surroundings, leaving isotopic scars as its only inheritance? Already our own species has written such signals into the earth. Nuclear testing has scattered rare isotopes like invisible signatures across the surface of the globe. Plastics and petrochemicals leave carbon traces that will not vanish for millennia. Fossil fuel combustion etches its mark into the ice in abrupt, unmistakable spikes. Were another species to rise millions of years hence, they would see our presence not in crumbling buildings but in isotopic anomalies, strange ratios that nature could not create by herself. To them it would be less history and more riddle. If that is true of us, why not of others? What if some peculiar isotope ratio already measured in rocks is not solely the work of volcanoes or meteors, but the faint ghost of industry long vanished? We dismiss it as anomaly because no clearer evidence appears, But perhaps absence is exactly what entropy ensures. What lingers then are the numbers, the chemistry, the quiet language too deeply buried to announce itself clearly. Listening to isotopes is like listening to static on a forgotten channel. Hidden among the noise, a pulse may sometimes surface. What if an industrial age rose and fell so long ago that only the chemistry remembers it? What if consciousness alters atoms in ways we have not yet fully recognized? A tiny abundance of some rare element waiting in a nucleus for us to stop overlooking it as simple chance. It may be that we are not yet sensitive enough to distinguish natural from deliberate. All signals from deep time arrive distorted, blurred by subduction, altered by heat, smeared across layers. We are left reading faint variations on a grand canvas, whispering to ourselves that most are accidents. But perhaps, here and there, one is not. One is intentional, a lingering note in the silence, the isotope as the fossil of an idea. There is almost comfort in this uncertainty, for if ideas can fossilize, and structures can erode into landscapes, then isotopes are their counterpart in the invisible realm. Nothing escapes the reach of deep time, not even thought in its material disguise. Traces may weaken, but they do not entirely disappear. In ratios and half-lives, they wait for eyes or ears capable of noticing. And so when we ponder the isotopic anomalies, when we hear their strange dissonance against background patterns, we are called not to answer, but to listen. What if they are echoes of struggles or triumphs, not our own? What if isotopes are Earth's deepest archive, subtle signals stretching through silence, reminders that something came before and something will follow after? Perhaps the truest fossils are not shells or skeletons, but moments of chemistry, and in those quiet shifts, in those hidden signatures, there may lie the most enduring testimony of all that intelligence itself once touched the world, and in touching it, changed it. And if signals can be hidden even within atoms, then memory is stranger than we know. It can be buried not only beneath stone or sea, but within the very building blocks of matter, which leads us gently to wonder how much of our world's story is scattered far finer, spread out like dust, a memory resting invisibly all around us. If isotopes are the secret script within atoms, then dust is their restless messenger. Unlike stone, dust does not stay still. It moves, it travels, it gathers and scatters, drifting across oceans, settling on glaciers, seeding forests an ocean away from where it was born. Dust whispers Earth's memory not from within, but across space, carrying fragments of what once was into places we would never expect. Every handful of dust is ancient. Pulverized mountains, eroded deserts, ground shells from oceans long vanished. Together they swirl in clouds invisible to most eyes. A single breath may hold remnants of rock weathered 1,000 miles away, fragments lifted high into the atmosphere by desert winds. In Greenland's ice, trapped layers of Saharan dust tell of storms blowing before cities rose on riverbanks. In Antarctic snows, the faint trace of volcanic ash reveals explosions from eras we never witnessed. Dust is migration, remembrance by scattering. Dust preserves catastrophe. After great eruptions, volcanic glass dust circles the globe, falling across continents, reminding us of the fire that once darkened skies. Geological layers rich in iridium, strange and rare, are dust left behind by the great asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs. Soot dust from burning forests and peat bogs marks extinctions and collapses. When we read sediment cores, dust is the punctuation, the thin layers that say, something ended here, something began after. And dust is not always nature's doing. Modern layers already sparkle with technodust, microscopic fragments of concrete, specks of plastic, the fine exhaustion of metals from human machinery. Thousands of years from now, archaeologists may find this dust hardened into rock, a strange record of our presence. But if this is true of us, might it also have been true of others? If a civilization unknown once spread across continents, surely its echoes would rise into the air as well, dust of constructions, dust of industry, dust of fire, Even if the structures themselves fell, the fine powder they shed may still rest in some corner of the record, waiting to be recognized as more than accident. Dust is delicate, but also enduring. Once settled into ice or lake sediment, it is sealed, layer upon layer, preserved as clearly as words pressed onto parchment. When scientists slice through cores, they open a book written not in letters but in grains, so small they must be magnified to reveal their meanings. And yet those meanings are clear: which wines once blew, which deserts stretched wider, which forests burned into ash, which oceans dried into salt. Dust carries absence as much as presence. It shows where land once thrived, only to crumble into sand. It shows how civilizations that farmed or burned reshaped air and soil until their influence journeyed far beyond their borders. There is tenderness in dust. It holds both the ruin and the memory of ruin. In every settled grain, there is a story of breakage, of something once whole ground, small enough to be carried away. But this smallness is what gives dust its reach. A shattered mountain may find itself scattered into every hemisphere. A forgotten fire may lay its trace on snow half a world away. Dust makes memory communal, spreading local stories into global echoes. And we too become dust. We speak of it in scripture and song, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But perhaps that is not an ending. Perhaps it is a translation. Our lives, once dissolved, will ride winds and rivers as fine particulates, feeding forests, staining glaciers, settling in distant oceans. In that sense, to become dust is to enter Earth's larger memory, carried farther than we ever could walk. Perhaps other civilizations too have joined this cycle. Their dust may already be within us, mingled invisibly in the air we breathe, the soil that grows our food, the raindrops that fall on rooftops. Dust unsettles the idea of forgetting, even when something crumbles beyond recognition. Even when form is lost, its smallest parts keep traveling. Mountains vanish, forests burn, civilizations collapse, but nothing leaves completely, broken apart finely enough. Stories persist through new landscapes, resting, dispersing, layering again in future stone. Dust resists disappearance by refusing to remain still. And so, to touch dust is to touch a chapter of Earth's infinite restless archive. In every mote floating in sunlight there may be memory of deserts spreading, of ancient eruptions, of vanished worlds. To sweep dust from a shelf is to scatter particles that may once have been part of mountains or temples or strangers whose names no one remembers. In this, dust is both intimate and cosmic, the most ordinary substance, and also the repository of eternity. When we breathe it in, perhaps we are inhaling testimony, not because it speaks, but because it lingers. What if within dust lie the only surviving fossils of civilizations so completely erased that nothing else remains? What if we carry them already, unknowingly inside our bodies, joining their fragments with our own? Dust is fragile, yes, but fragility is not the same as vanishing. Fragility spreads, flows, gathers itself into new forms. The memory of dust is a memory without boundaries, and that memory leads us onward to consider not only tiny fragments adrift, but the larger, stranger residues of civilization, objects designed by minds surviving in stone, metal, and time. And so the next question rises: if even dust can endure, then what of our technofossils still forming now, plastics, alloys, cements? Might there be other technofossils hidden among the strata of the deep past, waiting for us to learn how to see them? If dust is memory scattered, then technofossils are memory anchored. Objects born of intention, designed and assembled by thought, now awaiting their long apprenticeship in stone. Unlike bone or shell, which nature fossilizes with ease, these new materials are strangers to geology. Plastics, concretes, alloys, circuits, each is a language of matter not known to the earth before us, and yet already they settle into sediments, waiting patiently for their translation into deep time. They are not ruins in the usual sense. They are seeds, embedded in soil and sea, seeds that may one day bloom not into life, but into permanence. Fossilization is usually accidental, a chance of burial and replacement, but technofossils are deliberate from the beginning, objects shaped to resist. A plastic bottle will outlast centuries of rain. A concrete foundation will endure storms longer than wood or brick ever could. In this way, our artifacts are pre-adapted for survival in stone's memory. Millions of years from now, if anyone or anything were to peel back Earth's layers, they would find not only ammonites and trilobites, but shards of steel transfigured into new minerals, fossil walls of cement grown heavy with quartz and iron, strange lacings of polymer now indistinguishable from rock. Our civilization, through its artifices, is already preparing a future fossil record unlike any other. And here the question begins to echo back upon us. What if we are not the first? If we can see our own technofossils waiting, what prevents us from wondering whether technofossils also wait from long before, hidden deeper, folded into strata too ancient for names? Geologists occasionally discover mysterious metallic spherules within coal seams, or unusual deposits of alloys where no reasonable explanation exists. Most are swiftly classified as natural curiosities or dismissed as contamination. But even if 99 out of 100 are mundane, what of the one that is not, the one that is quietly out of place, a whisper of design in a world we call pre-human? Already, modern science has forced us to reconsider what natural means. The Anthropocene, a geologic epoch defined by our presence, is marked not by monuments, but by chemistry and technofossils. Future beings, perhaps millions of years from now, would know us before they knew our faces, by the isotope spikes of nuclear testing, by the layers of plastic hardened into technostratigraphy, by the synthetic compounds unrecognized in earlier eras. They might never guess our languages, but they would know our presence from the artifacts we left as fossils. And if this is true forward in time, then might it be true behind us as well? Might the silences of deep time carry technofossils we have not yet learned to recognize? There is humility in this speculation. The objects we call advanced may in the end be nothing more than minerals with peculiar shapes, absorbed into the patience of stone. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, even our digital devices may fossilize not as symbols of knowledge but as streaks of anomalous alloy in sandstones yet unborn. Technology may not outlive us as technology. It may endure only as geology, folded, fractured, half forgotten. Yet in that very humbling is the recognition that the trace exists, even if incomprehensible. Presence persists, if not meaning. We tread now among ruins we have made ourselves, derelict factories, abandoned highways, crumbling cities. These are young ruins, still legible to our eyes, but give them 1,000,000 years and they will be harder to pass than coral reefs. They too will be technofossils in waiting, stripped of their identity as buildings, remembered only as mineral anomalies. To imagine this is to face a double vision, one where our present is still bright with meaning, and another where it has already collapsed into silence and stone. And if this collapse is coming for us, why would it not also have come for others? If another civilization had risen and fallen before us, might they too have left technofossils that now lie disguised as mere geology? A vein of processed metal mistaken for ore, a seam of hardened material mistaken for volcanic glass, a lattice of chemical residues dismissed as natural coincidence. Only perception separates artifact from accident, and perception is a fragile thing when stretched across deep time. It may be that what we seek has already been found, that in laboratory catalogues of unexplained inclusions, in footnotes of geological surveys, evidence already lies hidden. It may be that no one recognized it for what it was, because we still do not know what kind of techno-fossil an unknown civilization would leave. Are we looking for the wrong shapes, the wrong signals, the wrong chemistry? Perhaps the fossil of their world endures not as an object, but as a layer of transformed earth itself, an alteration so deep that we mistake it as simply her own. And so when we hold a piece of polished metal, or weathered plastic, and think of how long it will last, we catch a glimpse of geologic humility. All of it will last long enough to confuse, to linger, to mislead. None of it will last long enough to be fully understood. Technofossils remind us that civilizations appear not in permanence but in residue, a strange legacy written not in monuments or words, but in shattered alloys and reformed sands. And if technofossils already wait for us in some forgotten seam, then the Earth's archive is fuller than we know. Dust carried memory across continents. Technofossils sink it deep into layers that will outlast every story we tell, which leads us with soft steps to another kind of forgetting. Landscapes wiped clean not by dust or artifact, but by the erasing hand of ice itself. If technofossils promise to endure, glaciers remind us of how completely memory can be taken away. Ice does not only preserve, it also erases. It scrapes continents bare, dragging its weight across mountains, grinding valleys smooth, carrying away entire landscapes in silence. If stone can remember, ice can forget. It is the world's great eraser, carving its way into the archive of Earth until previous chapters vanish without a trace. During the last ice age, much of the northern hemisphere was covered in sheets of ice thousands of meters deep. Imagine cities and forests buried beneath that white horizon, crushed and dragged as if swept from a chalkboard. Whatever may have stood there would not merely be buried. It would be obliterated, crumbled into gravel, scattered into moraines, smeared into sediment and carried south toward the sea. We might dream of a civilization erased by fire, drowned beneath oceans, buried in deserts, but the cold erasure of ice is more absolute. It leaves nothing behind to study, no ruin to puzzle over, no artifact to mistake for chance. Only smooth stone, only silence. And yet, the paradox remains. Glaciers also preserve, in pockets of permafrost. Mammoths lie waiting, their fur still soft to the touch, their stomachs holding grass from the day they fell. Pollen is suspended in ice. Bubbles of air archive past atmospheres. Fragments of DNA whisper from frozen soil. The ice erases large and visible things while protecting small and delicate ones. It flattens continents, yet it keeps tiny seeds safe. In this way, memory and forgetting coexist, woven together in the cold. We often imagine glaciers as eternal monuments, but they too are travelers. They advance and retreat, swelling with epochs and then shrinking away, leaving behind the landscapes we now walk upon. Many valleys we consider natural wonders, fjords, cirques, great U-shaped passes, are scars of vanished ice. Perhaps within these scars other vanishings, deeper and stranger, are folded. What if civilizations once wandered where those sheets spread? What if their settlements, their markers, their technofossils were scraped away so utterly that we will never find them, erased not by fire or flood, but by centuries of grinding? Science tells us that glacier movement is slow, yet unstoppable. Rocks caught in their bellies become teeth, rasping and sculpting the surface below. Skyscrapers, mountains, temples, all would collapse under such patience, pulled into fragments, pressed into sand. Even the idea of permanence falters when confronted with this immense silencing. The landscapes we see today have already been washed once clean, reset to zero by the ice long before memory began. And what of our present world? Ice still covers Greenland and Antarctica, heavy archives that may one day retreat, releasing what they keep while erasing more in their departure. Within them, history remains sealed. Ancient atmospheres, volcanic traces, even the blackened dust of distant wildfires. But when they melt, that record spills and disassembles, washing into oceans, fragmenting beyond recovery. What they preserve is temporary. What they erase is forever. It is humbling to imagine civilizations that might have risen in those lost landscapes on plains now ground away, or valleys now entirely reshaped, their every stone wiped from the record. If they existed, their silence is complete. No dust, no fossil, no techno-fossil would remain. Perhaps this is why absence often feels so strong, because it is the only trace left when evidence has been utterly removed. Still, the Earth keeps secrets differently in different places. where glaciers obliterate, deserts reveal, where ice scours, oceans bury, each element transforms memory, reshaping it into different forms. Together they compose a strange equation. Some things will be preserved, others silenced, most half-changed into riddles, and it is in this unsteady mixture of memory and forgetting that wonder lives. Maybe this is why landscapes move us so deeply. Mountains, valleys, glaciers, deserts, all stir in us a sense of time far deeper than our own. We know, however dimly, that these forms are not only natural but historical, that they were carved by erasures we cannot witness. When we walk across polished rock smoothed by vanished ice, we are stepping into silence itself, a silence broad enough to conceal entire worlds. And yet, silence is never complete. In the grooves glaciers leave, in the boulders dropped carelessly across plains, a voice lingers, the voice of erasure. Yes, but also of transformation. Absence may dominate, but it is absence with shape, absence with direction. Even what is taken leaves trace in how the taking happened. And so the vanishing landscapes remind us what is lost is never simply gone. It becomes a ghost outline, a shape of forgetting carved into stone. And if landscapes themselves can vanish so thoroughly, then perhaps forgetting is not an exception but a principle, a law of time, which leads us softly toward the deeper mystery of forgetting itself and how it shapes not only history but us. Forgetting is often imagined as absence, as a void where something should be, but forgetting, like memory, has its own shape. It does not arrive suddenly, nor does it vanish all at once. It spreads slowly, like mist across a valley at dawn, soft, patient, obscuring details, until all that once stood sharp is blurred into outlines, and then into silence. The earth forgets in exactly this way, not abruptly, but with gradual veils, hiding entire histories beneath layers of time until they dissolve into anonymity. We see this in geology. A fossil bone, if exposed too long to air, crumbles back into dust. A stone wall, once precise in its construction, loosens over centuries, its edges tumbling back into rubble, then into soil. Forgetting rarely erases in clean strokes, it rounds and softens, so that what was distinct slowly becomes indistinct, like water smoothing the sharp corners of rock. It is a forgetting that reshapes until only vague suggestion remains. There is comfort in this shape, though. Forgetting is not violent but gentle. Most of what the earth has held has slipped away through processes that are quiet: erosion, sedimentation, corrosion, pressure. Rivers remember for a season, then carry their stories out to sea. Forests remember for a generation, then rot into loam. Glaciers remember in ice, then melt, and the memory streams onward, dispersed. Perhaps forgetting is the natural state, and memory the brief defiance of it. And yet we resist. We carve symbols into stone, hoping they will remain. Though even granite softens in rain, we bury artifacts, imagining that one day they may be found. But the law of ages is clear. All that is surface eventually hides itself. Layers build upon layers, and what is buried no longer belongs entirely to the living. Civilization itself is subject to this same shape of forgetting. Libraries burn, languages collapse into silence. Entire peoples are remembered only in fragments, a shard of pottery, a half-preserved myth, a gap in the record where we feel more than we know. And what if there were civilizations before ours, swallowed entirely by this gentle erasure? Their forgetting would follow the same shape: structures reduced to stones, stones reduced to sediments, sediments folded into strata until no trace remained. Their stories would not end in catastrophe alone, but in the slow surrender of detail, until perhaps not even dust kept their company. Could it be that the earth has forgotten entire ages of thought, ages of dreaming, buried so deeply that we cannot even suspect their presence? Geology teaches us that forgetting has patterns. There are unconformities in rock, where millions of years are unrecorded, intervals lost to erosion before new layers began to form. These are literal blank spaces in the Earth's history, eras of which nothing remains, entire timelines collapsed into absence. They remind us that forgetting is not confined to human minds. The planet itself has gaps, places where memory failed, where the page was wiped clean before the next was written. And so perhaps the shape of forgetting is not a straight line but a rhythm, memory, silence, repeating endlessly. In our own lives, forgetting wears a similar face. Memories fade not suddenly, but gradually, dissolving into fragments. Half-heard laughter, the outline of a place, but not its name. The warmth of a hand without the detail of its lines. Just as rivers carve valleys, time carves details away. And just as mountains are worn to hills, stories are worn down to impressions. Is it possible that Earth herself forgets in the same human way, not abruptly, but with lingering ghosts, shadows of what once was persisting just beyond clarity? And yet, forgetting is not final obliteration. In its shape is always suggestion. The worn-down mountain still hints at the peak it once was. The ruins of a city still carry the outline of its streets. Even when words are lost, rhythms in language echo forward into new tongues. Forgetting shapes what survives, pruning memory into fragments that continue in other forms. Could this shaping be intentional, a law of time meant to keep the world from drowning in excess remembrance? For without forgetting, there would be no space for wonder. Forgetting, then, has its grace. It creates mystery. It leaves blanks that invite imagination, questions that fuel curiosity. If everything were remembered clearly, there would be no need for us to search, no spark to draw us deeper. Perhaps the earth forgets not to betray, but to beckon. Every absence is an invitation, every silence a threshold. And so we move gently through landscapes shaped by forgetting, valleys stripped bare by glaciers, cliffs smoothed by wind, archives of stone interrupted by gaps. We cannot help but wonder what might have been lost in those silences. Did entire peoples vanish so quietly that even entropy's artistry did not preserve them? Are we ourselves fated to join them, remembered only in shadows, our stories eventually blurred into the same vast mist? The shape of forgetting is not emptiness. It is form without detail, presence without clarity. It is the outline that remains after content has gone, like the ghost of handwriting on a rubbed page. And in that sense, forgetting is a kind of strange preservation, holding just enough to remind us that something was once there and no more. And if forgetting itself has a shape, then perhaps silence too has a path, written not in patterns or isotopes, but in waterways cut deep into stone, which draws us onward to another thought, that even rivers long dried may still carry the memory of redirection, signaling whispers of intention hidden within stone channels. If forgetting has its shape in erasure, then rivers show us how remembering can also disappear, flowing away into silence. For rivers are storytellers, carving valleys, scattering sediments, building deltas like signatures that stretch into the sea. But rivers, too, can vanish. Channels run dry, their beds left empty, their histories frozen into stone. These fossil rivers are archives of movement without water, traces of journeys long complete. They are signals from an older earth, curved across deserts and buried beneath rock, whispering through their absence what once was. Rivers shape landscapes more than any other form of motion. They strip mountains, spread soils across plains, ferry dust into oceans, carry the chemistry of worlds. Wherever rivers run, life gathers. Wherever they vanish, memory collapses. In the Sahara, beneath endless dunes, satellite mapping reveals ancient channels once as wide as the Nile, long since consumed by desert. These are fossil rivers, ghost waterways that tell us where abundance once flowed, where civilizations might have flourished in green oases, now lost to sand. Their silence is more eloquent than a flood, for in their dry footprints lies the unspoken truth: life was once here, then gone. Geologists read such rivers in the rocks. Cross-bedded sandstones whisper that flow once passed here. Ripple marks frozen into lithified dunes in Utah were once ripples of water. Now 100 million years vanished. Pebbles, rounded smooth, are sometimes found far from any current, locked into sediments as evidence that a river once rolled them patiently between its hands. Each signal is faint, but together they confirm that even in silence rivers continue their story. They may forget their names, but their shapes linger. And what of intention? Rivers are guided by gravity, yes, but sometimes they seem to bend where we do not expect, redirect where chance is not enough of an answer. Ancient societies we know redirected rivers with canals, embankments, and dams, leaving behind altered currents, sometimes even drying one bed to feed another. If we, with our short span of history, could sculpt rivers to our will, what might have been possible for another civilization lost in deep time? And if they too shifted waters, how would we recognize their trace millions of years later? Would a fossil river carrying the wrong geometry, too sharp, too direct, be the final whisper of a guiding hand? There are puzzles already. Rivers that dried far too suddenly, channels etched deep where catchment basins are too slight, beds ending abruptly where geology would have extended them further. Explanations exist, of course. Uplifts, faults, volcanic barriers. Yet the questions persist. Could some of these signals be not accidents of Earth's shifting crust, but the buried memory of rivers reshaped by thought, not chance? Rivers are so easily rerouted that their secrecy is natural. They obey, but they also remember, leaving beds behind like discarded stories. The fossil rivers hidden beneath sand and stone reveal more than hydrology. They show us the fragility of abundance. That which once blossomed with forests, floodplains, and wildlife can fade into silence, so complete that only the desert remains. The channels stay like scars, but their meanings vanish. Could this not be the fate of civilizations as well, thriving for millennia, then erased? Their only trace the empty imprint where their waters once ran. Sediments tell us, faintly. Floodplains capture pollen, specks of charcoal, isotopic hints of cultivation. In fossil riverbeds, scientists sometimes find unusual concentrations, microscopic signs of burned fields, traces of irrigation too precise for nature alone. We argue whether they are accidental or designed, but the fascination remains. A riverbed is more than stone. It is a memory of water's direction, and perhaps of someone's will. And still, forgetting hums beneath, fossil rivers remind us that most stories end in absence. Without the water itself, rivers become lines without meaning, channels too silent to confirm who shaped them. Their signals echo forward, but only faintly, and we are left to translate their ghost language with more wonder than certainty. Perhaps all that is left for us to feel is the tension between what might be natural and what might be touched, between what flowed freely and what was guided. The mystery humbles us, for rivers still flow today, carving, carrying, building new deltas that will one day be red as stone, and long after we are gone, fossil rivers formed of today's flows will cross some future desert, their signals waiting to be read by eyes not our own. Will those eyes wonder as we do? Will they ask softly whether these channels were wholly random or once traced by unseen hands? Fossil rivers prove that even absence can hold direction, and silence can still be a guide. They are the pathways carved in vanished water, the memory of movement written in emptiness. And if rivers carry signals even after their life has gone, then what of the oceans? What archives might lie beneath their shifting sediments, entire libraries layered silently beneath waves? If rivers are fleeting scribes, then the ocean is the library that gathers every note. Here in the restless hush of waves and the quiet accumulation of sediment, memory transforms into archive, everything carried by rivers. Dust, sand, pollen, ash, the faint chemistries of life and fire eventually finds its way into the sea. And once there, it falls quietly, settles, layers itself in stillness. Over time, this sediment becomes the most comprehensive archive Earth ever keeps, an unbroken diary of millions of years pressed deep into mud and stone. To study ocean cores is to hold time itself in your hands. Tube-like samples pulled from the seafloor contain rings of sediment, each millimeter a small story stretched across centuries. Within them lie pollen records telling us what once grew on vanished continents, chemical traces that decode climates thousands of years past, even fragments of volcanic glass that announce eruptions long before human eyes. The ocean collects. It does not discriminate. Every forest that burns, every desert that spreads, every civilization that leaves dust rising into the air, eventually its trace drifts downward into the patient silt, where the ocean will keep it safe. The ocean even remembers wind. Saharan dust has been found in cores halfway across the Atlantic, each grain a testimony of storms that roared when mammoths walked the earth. It remembers fire, for every eruption leaves its ash to settle into the sea, thin grey lines now buried under lighter sands. And it remembers life, for countless shells of plankton rain constantly into darkness, their calcium tests piling into vast deposits that one day harden into limestone. With each new fall of particles, the library thickens. Memory accumulates not by intention, but by gravity. And yet, as with all archives, there are gaps, contradictions, misinterpretations. The sediments shift under currents. Layers blur like smudged ink. Subduction swallows whole chapters, dragging ocean crust down beneath continents. The ocean keeps diligently, but its memory too has losses. Strata may fold, fragments may scatter. Reading this underwater book requires patience, humility, and the acceptance that not every page remains. Still, among all of Earth's modes of remembering, the ocean might be the most profound, for it does not only keep natural events, it also absorbs human ones. Core samples today already hold traces of our industries, lead from gasoline, chromium from steel, plastics too fine for sight, but resilient enough to last forever. Even isotopes from nuclear tests have already settled into seabeds, an unnatural gift to the library of deep time. Our brief presence is now secured as another layer, one day indistinguishable from volcanic glass or asteroid dust, to any future observer who struggles to decipher our meaning. If this is true for us, then it could have been true before. If another civilization had flourished long ago, surely the ocean would have collected their residues as well. Silt and metals altered by machines, faint isotopic changes carried by rivers into its wide basin, artificial dust falling like snow into its abyss. Over millions of years those marks may have been folded deep, obscured, distorted by currents, but some still may exist, locked into ancient stone waiting below trenches long unmapped. Could these be hiding in plain sight, mistaken for natural mineral anomalies because we lack the context to read them otherwise? There is a quiet allure in the thought that beneath the ocean floor lies not only geology but mystery, lost histories preserved, stripped of clarity yet stubbornly intact. It is one of the few places on Earth that records consistently, always layering, always keeping, as long as gravity and patience remain. Unlike mountains that erode, unlike deserts that scatter, sediments here fall and stay. The archive grows deeper, heavier, until it outweighs every story written on the surface. Yet the ocean does not keep memory untouched. Pressure transforms layers into rock. Chemistry alters as sediments compact. Silence presses down until detail is replaced by essence. The archive is curated not by librarians' intent, but by gravity's law. That which survives is not word for word, image for image, but outline, rhythm, residue. Could it be then that even if whole civilizations drowned there, what remains of them is not their forms but their shadows, chemical anomalies and unlikely geometries pressed into seabed stone? If so, then the sea is not only an archive, but a puzzle. Like a book with most of its words blurred, it requires imagination to read. Every line of ash, every pulse of carbon, Every subtle shift in isotope is both evidence and enigma. Science supplies explanations, but always in the margins of explanation lingers the possibility of something more. What if one of those strange lines, one of those inexplicable shifts, is the fossil of a civilization's story reduced to chemistry alone? We listen softly to the ocean's lull and remember that archives are not built for clarity, but for endurance. They whisper, they do not shout. Perhaps what is preserved in the seabed layers is meant not to give us certainty, but to keep us asking, to leave open the possibility that the past contains more than we can confirm. And so, as rivers disappear into sand, their signals caught in silence, the ocean preserves their whispers and carries them forward into eternity. But deeper still, within these sediments, anomalies remain, strange isotope signatures, unresolved spikes, suggesting that within this archive are pages we have not learned how to read, and it is there we must go next, into the mysteries of isotopic anomalies, where the Earth writes most cryptically, as though scribbling notes in margins of time itself. In the library of the sea, most layers seem clear enough. Ash from eruptions, spikes from asteroids, carbon hums of life and collapse. Yet scattered within these thick pages are entries that refuse to be translated. They are not neat signatures of fire or flood. They are isotopic anomalies, subtle but insistent, deviations that do not fit pattern or cause. These are the margins of Earth's book, the scribbled notes that resist explanation. And sometimes it is in the margins where the deepest mysteries are found. Isotopes serve as clocks, but also as storytellers. Carbon traces the balance of life. Oxygen records the dance of climate. Strontium whispers of rivers and rocks. Uranium shrinks away with perfect patience, ticking ages into stone. Against these rhythms, science has mapped extinctions, migrations, upheavals. Yet anomalies appear like sudden dissonant chords in familiar music. Ratios that refuse conformity, spikes that should not arise, elements clustered where no natural process should have gathered them. Most can be explained: supervolcanoes, cosmic rays, subtle shifts in ecosystems, but not all. It is the unexplained that holds us. Imagine scanning through the sediment record, watching centuries accumulate in grains of mud, when suddenly an iridium spike, one too large and out of place for geology to neatly explain, or a carbon shift so abrupt, so unnatural, it feels less like the Earth breathing and more like something exhaling all at once. Some say all riddles eventually resolve through new data, but what if some will not? What if these discordant notes are the only fossils left behind by something we have yet to recognize? Our own age ensures that we leave behind strange signals. Nuclear testing scatters isotopes across both hemispheres, detectable thousands of years from now. Industrial combustion blows carbon and sulfur disproportionately into both Arctic snows and remote tropics. New synthetic radionuclides, never before known on Earth, are released into land and sea. If another sentient being were to study these archives 10 million years hence, they would find isotopic anomalies pointing inexorably toward us, though not necessarily toward clarity. They would know only that something not quite natural once shaped the balance of the planet. And so the mirror darkens back toward the past. If we can so easily read ourselves in anomalies, could others also have left their signatures, veiled beneath the folds of time? What if the carbon spikes of an era were not only algae blooms, but fires kindled with intention? What if a rare isotope concentration, once attributed to volcanism, was in truth a byproduct of a technology long gone? Or what if radionuclides, unimaginable to us in ancient strata, hint at experiments unrepeated since? Science is trained to be cautious, and rightly so. To imagine industry in the Devonian, machinery in the Permian, cultured alloys in the Cambrian, this stretches our sense of probability. Nature already surprises us without invention. Supervolcanoes mimic factories, meteor impacts mimic weapons, biological shifts mimic industrial collapse. But speculation lives in the margins, and the anomalies that remain unresolved invite us to wonder whether the most extraordinary explanations are not merely possible, but already written into chemistry. Isotopic anomalies feel different from fossils. Fossils hold the shapes of what once was, visible to the eye. Anomalies are whispers at the atomic level, requiring translation through instruments and equations. They do not show us faces, only ratios, and yet that quiet subtlety makes them more enduring. Even when bones are gone and ruins erased, the atom itself may still carry testimony, scribbled in isotopes that resist lying flat. Perhaps every anomaly is an echo. Perhaps they are voices speaking in a tongue too abstract for us to recognize. Their irregularities might be fragments of an experiment, a catastrophe, an eruption of thought and fire combined. Or perhaps they are truly random, unlinked to intention, simply expressions of chaos. We cannot be sure, and perhaps we are not meant to be sure, for certainty would end asking, and asking may be the only way memory survives. This is why the anomalies feel like a library of unsolved riddles, not orderly volumes. They remind us that Earth has kept not only what is stable, but what is strange. We might never resolve every deviation in isotope curves. Instead, they will remain as marginalia, annotations written by hands we cannot know, or perhaps by entropy itself pretending to be author. And still we search, for within these subtle signals lies the most haunting of possibilities, that memory exists everywhere, even in what we cannot easily read. And if anomalies remain unresolved, they leave room for stories older than ours. Memory, hidden in disagreement, hidden in imperfection, hidden in the ratios of matter itself. And so we leave the isotopic library, not with answers, but with questions. It is in questions that anomalies retain their meaning, and questions, as always, draw us further into mystery. For if entire extinctions can appear as chemical spikes, then perhaps the very curtain calls of Earth itself, the endings that silence life, are not merely events but memories folded into the planet's marrow, which leads us onward, gently, into the dark threshold where extinction itself waits, heavy as a closing curtain. Every performance has an ending, and on Earth, the largest endings come as extinctions. They arrive not as sudden notes to us who look back, but in the vast perspective of deep time, they are swift curtains falling across the stage of life. Whole lineages, trilobites, ammonites, mammoths, step into silence, leaving behind only faint outlines in stone, or worse, nothing at all. Extinctions are not only losses, they are interruptions in memory, pulses of forgetting that reset the shape of the world. The fossil record reveals this rhythm, long expanses of continuity, then sudden breaks where diversity collapses and ecosystems fall dark. At these interruptions, new life will eventually bloom, but the old is gone forever. The isotopic signatures tell us when it happened: carbon plummeting, oxygen ratios swinging, iridium lacing the strata. A stage once filled with actors empties swiftly into echoes, leaving only the backdrop of Earth itself. No curtain is ever complete, and yet the silence after each extinction feels full, deliberate, as though the world itself were pausing in between acts. Consider the end Permian, sometimes called the Great Dying. 90% of species vanished. The oceans grew lifeless and still. Forests collapsed into wasteland. This was no small rearranging, but a complete transformation. If anything unknown, any civilization, any intelligence had flourished in those vanished ecosystems, the curtain would have fallen across them too. What remains now is not their story, but the silence of their erasure. The same silence holds the sudden end of dinosaurs, the quieter losses of the Pleistocene, the hidden extinctions we will never even name. Extinction is both archive and erasure. It preserves catastrophe as a sharp boundary in strata, while erasing every detail that came before. We know where the curtain fell. We can measure its timing, but we cannot know everything it carried off into darkness. If we search for forgotten civilizations beneath these curtains, we find ourselves confronted by paradox. Extinction would both hide them absolutely, and at the same time leave traces in chemistry. The record is blunt, unyielding. Something happened here. What that something was remains veiled. Perhaps this is why we return, again and again, to these great divides in time. Staring at them as we would at a closed door, we wonder not only about the species we know, fish, reptiles, forests, but also about what other stories might have been crumpled in those endings. Could entire intelligences have perished, leaving not ruins or relics, but only ash, only gaps? And if so, was that silence any different than our own might one day be? Extinction also commands perspective. We like to imagine ourselves as immune to curtains, as permanent within Earth's chronicle. But the truth is clear. Extinction waits for everything. The actors may change, the dramas may differ, but each curtain still falls. The difference now is that we can imagine it. We can look at the fossil record and recognize that we too walk toward an eventual ending. In this way, extinctions are not simply events of the past, but shadows extending into the present, reminders written across stone that nothing lasts forever. And yet within the curtain lives strange beauty. The silence after each extinction is fertile in its own way. New lineages step forward in time. New actors fill the stage. There is always renewal, even if it is shaped from absence. Perhaps this is why life survives at all, because forgetting, even when vast, is never pure nothingness. Something always lingers, and from it, something always begins again. Still, we are left unsettled. Each curtain call is final. The trilobite will never return, nor the vast forests before the Permian collapse. Their time is over, their lines forgotten, their memory contained only in subtle stone, and so too, perhaps, with any civilization erased by extinction. What could survive but the faintest signals, ratios, anomalies, strange dust layered thin between worlds? We might never know what stories were cut short mid-sentence, swallowed and made eternal only in silence. Extinctions close acts, redraw stages, rearrange the cast, but their truest legacy may not be the species they erase or those they allow to bloom. It may be the reminder that even silence has form, even absence has weight. The curtains themselves are part of Earth's great memory, guiding us to see how both life and forgetting are woven together. And if extinction is curtain call, then what of the stones it leaves behind, those crystals and minerals grown quietly during the darkness, forming silently while the world above reset itself? Perhaps they too hold testimonies unconcerned with actors, witnesses of fire and pressure, silent archives beyond extinction. When curtains fall and life is silenced, stone and crystal remain. They are not alive, yet they listen in their own way, indifferent to triumph or extinction, preserving the conditions of the world within their fragile order. Every crystal is a memory of its birth environment, its size, its clarity, its inclusions, a record of temperature and pressure, of fluids seeping through cracks, of violent transformation compressed into lattice. They speak no words, yet their silence is a testimony. And if testimony can persist through form alone, is it not here in the patience of crystal that even forgotten ages may have left their faintest mark? Quartz grows slowly, layer by layer, trapping in its delicate web the story of surrounding shifts. Microscopic bubbles sealed within some crystals contain not only fluids, but the chemistry of vanished worlds, gases long gone from the atmosphere, fragments of water that fell as rain millions of years ago, whispers of climates no longer imaginable. A crystal does not forget, it does not judge. It only traps, seals, holds small archives, transparent yet secret, gleaming quietly in the dark. Diamonds carry even deeper stories. Born under crushing pressures far beneath our feet, they sometimes rise to the surface carrying tiny inclusions of minerals that could not survive otherwise. Within those inclusions are time capsules of mantle chemistry, changes wrought thousands of kilometers below us, long before the surface shifted into forms we now know. Even gemstones, delicate, coveted, cut into bright ornament, are fragments of memory, silent perhaps, but never empty. And yet silence can mislead. A crystal fractured by earthquakes may look ordinary, but its lattice is warped in ways that tell of unimaginable violence. Zircon grains, tiny but nearly indestructible, can be read like clocks, revealing the ages of crust and magma, registering not only time but the scars of bombardment and upheaval. Without these silent shards, we would not know the earliest history of the Earth at all, for in their soundless testimonies lies the evidence of oceans forming, mountains lifting, atmospheres changing. If crystals and minerals can hold such record, then what of events stranger still? Could they also carry traces not only of volcanoes, pressures and fires, but of works beyond nature, fires lit by industry, chemistries shifted by intelligence, patterns born not of tectonics but of hands? We already know our own age leaves crystalline marks, concrete hardening into artificial stone, synthetic materials forming unfamiliar mineral families, microscopic particles trapped in glaciers and sedimentary quartz, forever infused with our chemistry. If time transforms our inventions into crystalline testimony, could other eras have done the same? Their story may already be there, misread as natural inclusion, artifact mistaken for accident. Perhaps someday we will discover in zircon or quartz an anomalous inclusion, an element ratio so out of place it resists geologic reasoning. Perhaps we already have, but our explanations have hidden it in the folds of coincidence. The testimony remains, waiting, but it cannot speak. We must learn how to listen differently. For crystals, unlike books, do not declare. They must be coaxed, dissolved, measured, examined in light that reveals what the human eye cannot see. What haunts us is how unassuming they are. Clear quartz resting in a palm, a fragment of amethyst found in sandy soil, a diamond set into ornament. Each looks simple, even ordinary, yet in their silence lives the most durable memory of all. Long after flesh decays, after wood rots, after iron rusts away, crystalline structure endures, bearing within it the evidence of what has come and gone. They do not shout, they endure by stillness. So when we gaze at a crystal, glittering softly in sunlight, perhaps we are seeing not only beauty but testimony, testimony so slow, so soundless, it cannot fade, testimony that holds both catastrophe and calm, testimony not for us, but for the planet itself. And if within crystals entire atmospheres can remain trapped, why not other traces too? Why not the faintest inroads of forgotten invention, absorbed across time into lattices harder than memory itself? Perhaps this is the final paradox of crystals. They are so ordinary yet so profound, they resist breaking down, and thus hold what all else forgets. They are not alive, but they remember. And as such they remind us, memory is not only in words or in fossils, but at the level of the lattice, the structure, the precise silence of order preserved. And if crystals bear witness silently, then perhaps mountains themselves, in their grander lattices, tell stories too, folds and fractures written across entire continents, which draws us onward, leaving crystal's quiet chamber, to step once more into the open air, to hear what the very architecture of mountains might still have to say. If crystals hold the intimate testimonies of time, mountains themselves are the vast equations, summations written across the face of the earth. To stand before a range is to feel calculation expressed in stone, angles repeating, folds stacked upon folds, peaks rising in strange symmetries, as though some invisible geometry had been followed. Mountains are memory on a scale so large that we cannot grasp it in a glance. They are shaped not in years but in millions of years, tectonics pressing, colliding, heaving, as though solving a problem written in the bedrock of the planet. Every summit is a sum of forces, plates converging, sediments compressed, ancient seas lifted into the sky. Fossils of ocean creatures rest today at the tops of the Himalayas, reminders that even the highest ground was once seabed, evidence that mountains carry archives not only of heights but of depths. Each ridge, each crag is a number in the arithmetic of deep time, an expression born from movements too slow for us to see, but too grand to deny once finished. And yet, within this physical arithmetic, patterns emerge that stir a deeper curiosity. Some alignments stretch unnaturally straight across hundreds of miles, peaks forming series that mirror triangles and arcs, more deliberate than accident should allow. Geologists explain through faults and folds the ripple of collision zones where forces distributed their energy evenly, and that is true. Yet standing among them, one can still feel haunted by the neatness, as if the Earth's solving had borrowed pages from some unseen architect's geometry. Could this arithmetic be more than chance? Could it be a relic hidden within natural processes, echoes of shapes chosen long before we were here to measure? The Andes, the Rockies, the Himalaya, each vast range follows lines traced by tectonic inevitability. But inevitability still creates patterns, and patterns invite interpretation. Ancient peoples noticed it too. Myths spoke of mountains as sleeping gods, as ordered guardians marking the Earth's horizon. They saw intention where we see tectonics, and perhaps they were not wrong to sense order, even if the order belongs to forces deeper than myth or reason. Mountains do not rise without rhythm. They fold according to structure. They crumble in sequences. Arithmetic runs through them like veins of quartz. But the question persists, is the arithmetic only geological, or could something else be written there too? Messages hidden in scale so enormous we mistake them for natural necessity. Perhaps the logic of certain ranges, their symmetries too neat, their repetitions too insistent, are not merely tectonic solutions but faint remnants of landscapes altered, guided, nudged by presences we have long since forgotten. What civilization could think in kilometers, design in epochs, sculpt continents as canyon hands sculpt sandstone? The idea feels extravagant, impossible, and yet the neatness keeps whispering. We see arithmetic also in erosion, the way glaciers carve U-shaped valleys, rivers etch V-shaped canyons, wind hollows, domes, and stacks. Their outlines feel instructional, like diagrams of process itself. If we lived long enough, we might see their equations resolve. The mountains smoothed to nothing, the entire range faded into low plains, arithmetic solved into silence. But alive within the present, we stand in mid-calculation, the equation still half-written before our eyes. Perhaps that is why mountains awe us so. They confront us with an unfinished solution we can only guess at. And in this unfinishedness lies room for speculation. A row of peaks rising equidistantly like teeth. A perfect triangle repeating in valley after valley, a symmetry so bold it resembles a blueprint. It is easy to dismiss it as coincidence, the byproduct of inevitability, but coincidence has its own strange arithmetic. The repetition of form across scales, mountain to dune to ripple in sand, seduces the eye into sensing meaning. Maybe there is no hidden architect, maybe the arithmetic is simply the planet's own handwriting, and yet, maybe not. The arithmetic of mountains cannot be read in haste. Their numbers take too long to reveal. Each collapse, each fold, each uplift is another digit in a sum that may extend beyond the very lifespan of civilization. To us, it is mystery. To them, it is inevitability. They will grow and crumble whether we stare or sleep, keep their mathematics whether we solve it or not. And yet, as we leave their presence, another thought lingers. If even mountains are only temporary sums, equations constantly rewritten, then nothing on Earth is final. Every peak, no matter how grand, will erode to silence. Every number, no matter how vast, will one day resolve into dust. Arithmetic itself collapses back into zero, which leads us softly onward from mountains dissolving into dust to the very stuff of life and ruin itself. Carbon, fragile yet eternal, shaping both bodies and ruins, preserving traces long after identity has gone. From the sweep of mountains dissolving into dust, we arrive at the quiet heart of life's design, carbon. Where mountains endure by mass and momentum, carbon endures by versatility. weaving itself into countless patterns. It is the fragile architect, forming chains, lattices, rings, all the structures upon which living memory is built. And yet, for all its strength in number, carbon is delicate. It flares into fire at a touch, reshapes easily into graphite or diamond, and joins with oxygen to vanish invisibly into the air. Carbon is permanence and disappearance, creation and erasure, folded into one. Every breath we take is an act of carbon in motion, inhaling its dioxide, exhaling its shifted form. Every body is a textile of carbon, protein and bone spun from its threads. Every forest, every microorganism, every thought sparked in a neuron is underpinned by carbon's fragile architecture. In deep time it records life not by intention but by chemistry. Fossil fuels are ancient sunlight, translated into stored chains of carbon, buried for millions of years, then rekindled as flame when struck by human hand. In this way carbon remembers, but its memory is combustible, fleeting, dangerously easy to erase. Geology treats carbon both as messenger and as riddle. Limestone cliffs, white and towering, are libraries of carbon, each block formed of shells and skeletons once living in ancient seas. They are the frozen testimony of oceans filled with life, hardened into mountains that now break surf upon their faces. Coal, black and fragile, is another archive. Forests turned into compressed memory, trees layered beneath pressure until they became dark mirrors of the life they once sustained. Every piece of coal is a chapter of green growth lost and rewritten under stone's weight. Every limestone outcrop a petrified reef where ancient creatures sang in silence. Carbon is the material of fossils both small and planetary. And yet, carbon is treacherous to permanence. It requires ideal burial conditions to endure. Exposed, it burns or dissolves. Most of the architecture built upon it vanishes without trace, recycled endlessly by atmosphere and ocean. This fragility means that the vast majority of life leaves no fossil, no signal forgotten except within the cycles of chemistry. How many civilizations, how many delicate architectures might be lost in this way? If they lived in fragile forms, written in carbon too permeable to withstand destruction, then entropy would erase them almost completely, leaving only faint anomalies, brief scars, chemical hints smudged into the rock record. Our own age reveals carbon's power to testify. In polar ice, the balance of carbon dioxide traces the breath of civilizations. In ancient cores, small shifts reveal abrupt climate events, forests burned, oceans suffocated, deserts spread. More recently, humanity's wide combustion has etched an unmistakable spike into the curve of the carbon cycle, a mark unlike any other across hundreds of thousands of years. This too will fossilize, not in stone figurines or monuments, but in ratios invisible to the eye. Carbon is what will most certainly testify that we were here. Yet carbon is also fragile. Its testimony may be altered, blurred, misplaced, until what seems clear today dissolves into tomorrow's enigma. If our presence can be written in carbon, is it not possible that another's once was, a sudden carbon spike in a forgotten epoch, usually explained as volcanic surge or massive die-off, might also be the artifact of fire kindled on a civilizational scale? How would we know the difference? Fire is fire. Atmosphere does not distinguish between eruption and the burning of forests by human hands. To read carbon is to read in shadow, because its architecture decays as easily as it forms. It is at once the most honest and the most elusive archive Earth carries. Perhaps this is why carbon feels like such a paradox. It is delicate, fragile, vanishing with a spark, and yet through it all, life thrives endlessly. It is fragile in moment but eternal in cycle, burned into air, absorbed into leaf, buried into rock. Like memory, it disappears in detail but persists in rhythm. Civilizations may fall, but carbon remains, circling endlessly through new forms, bearing silent witness that something, someone, once lived and breathed here. To touch coal or limestone is to touch a memory written not in language but in fragile architecture. To see carbon's patterns in chemistry is to glimpse unspoken stories. Fire may erase, but traces always circulate. Even in disappearance, carbon whispers continuity. It shows us how to endure through transformation, how to persist without permanence, how to remember by forgetting. And so in this fragile element, we find both humility and mystery. Carbon builds us, but it also erases us. Its testimony is incomplete, but what stronger testimony could there be than the cycle itself, unceasing, indifferent, yet carrying fragments of every life through stone, air, and water? And if carbon is life's fragile architecture, what else might deep time cradle? What if the epochs that came before us, measured not in thousands but in millions of years, have already cycled through rise and erasure, their memories diffused into the same fragile chemistry? From that thought we are drawn onward to consider the abyss itself, the time before time we count. We measure time as though it begins with us, as though history starts when we first traced lines on clay tablets or carved symbols into stone. But this is only the thinnest film on an ocean deeper than we can imagine. Beneath the span of written memory lies prehistory, and beneath prehistory lies an abyss, epochs upon epochs of existence we cannot name, stretches of duration so vast that our minds cannot quite hold them. This is the time before time we count. To stand on a cliff face is to see a cross-section of that abyss. Each layer is older than the one above, stacked down into secrecy. The topmost strata belong to the Holocene, our present moment. Beneath them lie the Pleistocene, the Pliocene, the Miocene, each one stretching millions of years. Beneath them, deeper sequences, the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, the Devonian. Keep travelling down and the names begin to blur into the Precambrian, a billion years of near silence, where life stirred only faintly, and still the bedrock continues further back. 4 billion years into time unmeasured. Who among us can count that far? Who can imagine memory before memory? Geological clocks remind us that our entire species arose within the narrowest slice of this grand timeline. Modern civilization is measured in mere thousands of years, yet in that abyss there is room for civilizations to rise and fall countless times, leaving nothing obvious behind. A million-year civilization would still be a whisper in Earth's archive, an interruption erased and pressed flat by tectonics, erosion and extinction events. The seeming silence of rock is not absence, it is simply too vast for detail to survive. Sometimes we ask if aliens might have visited, if intelligences elsewhere could have reached us, but perhaps we should ask the opposite, whether Earth herself has hosted more than one intelligence, more than one flowering of invention, within the long abyss before we began to count. What if before our time, another people lit fires, shaped stones, wrote their own brief dramas, only to vanish into the same abyssal forgetting? If carbon can erase their breath, if glaciers can scour their ruins, then all we could hope to find are faint signals, anomalies, patterns carrying across eons like echoes too far to place. The abyss unsettles us, because it reveals how brief we are. Civilizations we admire, the Egyptians, the Maya, the Greeks, are recent shadows compared to even a single ice age, and ice ages themselves are transient compared to the deep corridors of time where continents rose and fell, seas opened and closed, life evolved and collapsed over and over. Within that abyss, even permanence becomes impermanent. Our great monuments, our cities and satellites may endure centuries, perhaps millennia, but in the library of the earth they would be footnotes erased almost instantly. And yet, the abyss also comforts. Its silence teaches us that we do not need to carry everything forward. Time swallows without cruelty. It enfolds all mistakes, all triumphs, all losses and joys. Perhaps civilizations before us also added their voices and slipped quietly into the dark, their memory dissolved, their traces dust among the stars or sand beneath our feet. If so, then we are not the first actors on this stage, and not the last. We are part of a continuum larger than we can name. Science reaches bravely into this abyss, but it too whispers of limits. Radiometric clocks can take us back billions of years, but they cannot show us intention. Fossils can reveal structures, but not culture. Rocks can hold chemistry, but not language. The abyss before counting is filled with records we cannot interpret, because they are stripped to abstraction. All that remains are gaps, silences, and anomalies, and perhaps it is in those anomalies that other stories hide. Perhaps when we glance at stray data and dismiss it, we are brushing against the hem of forgotten civilizations, erased yet not entirely gone. To imagine this time is to feel small, but also expanded. We are small because the abyss dwarfs us, revealing our fragility. We are expanded because in imagining other civilizations, unnamed and unknowable, we glimpse our belonging to something greater. The possibility that Earth has hosted many forms of dreaming, many attempts at meaning, each ephemeral, each erased, each folded back into the abyssal rhythm of time. The time before time we count is not truly past. It lives beneath us, around us, above us, embedded in every stone, every isotope, every fossilized ripple. It whispers through crystals, through mountains, through dust. It is memory dissolved into matter, too deep to be precise, but too real to be ignored. And though we cannot read it clearly, its presence shapes us. It fills our curiosity, stirs our wonder, slowly loosens our grip on certainty, invites us to ask again and again what came before. And if time stretches so far backward beyond our reckoning, it must also stretch forward with equal immensity. What we call the abyss is not only behind us, but ahead, ages yet to come, pages yet to be written, civilizations perhaps yet unborn. We are simply one marker in the middle of a boundless corridor, one candle flickering briefly in an unimaginably long night. And if time is so uncountable, so vast, then perhaps even silence itself contains layers, accumulating like sediment, thickening over eons, until silence itself transforms into a kind of chorus, a quiet resonance we cannot yet hear. Silence is not emptiness. It is weight, presence, vibration beneath hearing. As we wander through the abyss of time, silence thickens around us, shaped not by stillness but by entropy, the endless turning of order into disorder, memory into forgetting. Entropy is often thought of as destruction, a collapse into chaos, but listen more closely and it becomes something else. A chorus, a steady music sung not in notes but in dissolutions, not in sound but in absence. Every ruin hums with it. A wall broken into rubble is entropy's verse, stone settling into soil, soil blending into wind, wind carrying dust away. Every fossil, too, tells a quieter refrain. Organic structures reworked into mineral, their order disassembled and yet preserved into a new symmetry. Every atom's decay, every isotope's steady transformation is another line in this ongoing composition. It moves slowly, but without pause, a song we rarely recognize because it is written not for ears, but for time itself. Science reminds us that entropy is the law beneath all laws, the arrow of time, the reason a shattered glass does not reassemble, the inevitability that memory always frays at its edges. In the universe, stars burn down, galaxies spread, heat disperses. On Earth, civilizations crumble whether forgotten or revered, each monument soon enough joining wind-blown sand. Yet within this steady dissolving is also structure. Entropy erases, but never randomly. It erases according to rhythm. It rounds edges, softens lines, creates patterns where intention has vanished. And so its silence is not merely mute. It is patterned silence, a kind of background music in which all stories eventually dissolve. We see it vividly in landscapes. Desert mazes shaped by erosion look like cathedrals. Columns of basalt resemble sculptures. Caverns widened by dripping water sound like vast empty halls. None were built by design, and yet entropy composes them as if it were an architect. Whether in the collapse of cities or the shattering of stones, It takes the deliberate and the accidental alike, weaving both back into the chorus of silence that swells over deep time. Could civilizations before us have also succumbed to this same chorus, their walls softened to cliffs, their fires reduced to trace isotopes, their voices dissolved to dust, now drifting across oceans? Entropy is the great equalizer. Whether human hands built or nature shaped, it matters little in the end. The chorus absorbs them equally. What might remain is not certainty, but resonance, a suggestion, a geometry we cannot dismiss, a chemical anomaly we cannot explain, echoes within the silence, hidden within the chorus. Entropy's chorus reminds us of forgetting, but it also reminds us of endurance, for even as it unravels detail, it leaves rhythm intact. The mountain will not remain sharp, but it will persist as valley and plain. The fossil shell loses its organic matter, but its outline lingers in stone. The chorus never halts. It only transforms what is carrying fragments into new arrangements. In this way, absence itself becomes form. It is tempting to imagine silence as void, but deep silence, the silence written by entropy, becomes something fuller. It is not silent by lack, but silent by abundance. Too many dissolutions, too many overlaps, too many erasures layered upon each other until the result is a chorus so vast, it no longer resolves into individual voices. Entropy is not mute. It is the low hum of everything dissolving at once. And we, fleeting beings, are part of it. Each forgotten thought, each collapsed building, each decayed atom in our bodies eventually joins this grand composition. Our civilizations too compose into silence, becoming notes not obvious but resonant within the measureless song. Perhaps entropy is not cruel but fair, giving each story the same final refrain to dissolve into the chorus and join eternity's background music. What if, within this chorus, faint harmonies exist, patterns left by vanished civilizations, civilizations erased yet still singing within entropy's dissolution? We may never untangle order from coincidence, never separate design from entropy's artistry, but perhaps that is not the point. Perhaps the point is to listen differently, to let silence itself carry meaning. And so entropy is not the end of story, but its translation. Memory becomes silence. Silence becomes form. Form becomes another layer in the deep hymn of earth. To walk open landscapes, vast and quiet, is to hear this hymn without words. To stand in ruins softened by weather is to sense the chorus pressing gently outward. To breathe in dust is to breathe in fragments of old voices folded seamlessly into chorus. Entropy's chorus erases us, yet in that erasure it preserves something stranger, a resonance beyond particularity. The silence thickens, echoes overlap, and the result is not nothing. It is music we cannot quite hear, but which seems always to linger. And if entropy can compose endless silence into a chorus, then even ashes themselves, remnants of fire, carried through sky and stone, become instruments within this vast music. And so we turn toward them next. Ashes scattered, ashes persisting, silent fragments that refuse to speak, yet refuse also to vanish. Ash is what remains when fire has said everything. It knows how to say. It is the residue of transformation, the fragile powder born when matter releases its energy into light and heat. Fire is speech, sudden and loud. Ash is silence, pale and fine, left where voices have burned away. And yet even in silence, ash lingers. It clings to air, falls to ground, drifts into rivers, settles in strata, refusing to vanish. It endures, mute, inscrutable, reluctant to tell what it once belonged to. Volcanoes leave their story in ash clouds that circle the earth, falling onto lakes and oceans, pressing themselves into sediments. Asteroid impacts darken skies with ash, silencing forests, suffocating seas, announcing catastrophe in layers geologists can still read millions of years later. And when civilizations burn, Whether their forests cleared, their houses destroyed, their cities consumed, their ash also travels. Charcoal flecks in soil, soot in distant ice cores, microscopic remnants distributed globally. Ash is the shadow side of combustion, fragile yet persistent, refusing to disappear even as detail vanishes. Science treats ash as evidence. A thin band of dust between strata tells of catastrophic endings. The Cretaceous, marked forever by fire and iridium-flecked ash, testimony to a day when nearly everything ended. Archaeologists trace ancient hearths by patches of charcoal buried in caves, ashes that whisper, someone was here, someone tended flame, and yet there is a limit. Ash does not preserve forms. It holds only proof of burning, not of what was burned. A city and a forest leave the same silence when reduced to ash. A library of words and a hillside of dry grass both become dust impossible to tell apart. Ash remembers the fire, but refuses to reveal the story. This refusal is haunting. If earlier civilizations ever thrived, their endings might well have been marked by ash. Fires, deliberate or accidental, natural or industrial, would have left residues in soil and sea. Perhaps some of the ashen bands we read as volcanic doom were in truth more complex, concealing traces of vanished hands. But without clearer testimony, the ash itself says nothing. It will not tell us whether its origins were forest or furnace, volcano or village. It is a witness that survives, but a witness that keeps its mouth closed. And yet, ash holds atmosphere within it. Ash darkens skies, alters climate, seeds rainfall, cools summers. Its silence changes the world around it, reshaping the ecosystems that follow. Life responds to ash as soil, as pathway, as canvas for regrowth. In this way, refusing to speak of the past, ash nonetheless shapes the future. Its silence reverberates forward through time in consequence, if not in narrative. Perhaps this too is a lesson that not all memory is meant to be transparent. Some remain stubbornly opaque, preserving not the story but only the fact of erasure. Ash is its own kind of archive, an archive of absence. It tells us that something ended here, that fire consumed, that change was absolute. Beyond that, it locks its truth away, daring us to imagine what might have burned. And so we encounter ash as a paradox, fragile, light enough to disappear on a breeze, yet stubborn enough to endure in sediment cores for millions of years, silent, refusing to carry clear voices, yet insistent, refusing to vanish. Is this not what forgetting feels like as well? A memory thinned to dust, stripped of detail, leaving only the knowledge that something was once alive, but nothing more. We may never know how many lost worlds ended in ash. We may never distinguish volcanic catastrophe from cultural collapse in those pale streaks buried in rock, but perhaps the act of asking is enough. Perhaps the silence of ash is its true purpose, to remind us that not everything can be proved, that absence itself becomes evidence, that stubborn gaps are part of Earth's deeper memory. And when we see that, when we accept that ash resists speaking, our attention shifts. We begin to wonder not about what ash withholds, but about what rests beneath it, beneath shallow layers of dust and silence, beneath the weight of erasure. Could there not be more entire civilizations hidden beneath sediment, swallowed and buried, folded under the very ground we walk? Beneath every city lies another city. Streets lay their stones over foundations older than memory, and those foundations cover still earlier lives. In some places, archaeologists peel back layers and discover 10, 12 complete worlds stacked one upon another, each generation quietly becoming the soil for the next. Civilization accumulates not in straight lines but in strata. We walk daily on the roofs of forgotten rooms. But what if the pattern goes deeper still? What if beneath the deepest layers of known history, buried under not decades or centuries but entire epochs, there rests the erased memory of civilizations unimaginable? Could layer upon layer of stone conceal not only the echoes of our familiar ancestors, but also worlds that predate our concept of human time. Cities themselves fossilize unevenly, wood rots, clay dissolves, but stone persists. In Çatalhöyük, in Jericho, in Rome, walls remain beneath modern markets, threads of an ancient tapestry surviving in place. Here collapses memory, for even ruins can be foundations, and yet we are humbled to realize how shallow such strata are compared to deep geological time. Go back even 10,000 years, and we find traces only faintly. Go back 100,000, and nearly everything is absence. Beyond that, the Earth's crust begins its own rewriting, a process that erases almost all detail as it folds old soils into new rock. Still, absence is not always complete. Fragments endure in patience and chance. A pottery shard might sleep undisturbed for millennia. A buried floor may survive under volcanic ash. And on rare occasions, whole cities persist, preserved beneath landslides or under rivers silted shut. These are the testaments of known peoples. But what humbles us is the possibility that the same could be true of entirely unknown civilizations, peoples who built, lived, and disappeared so completely that what remains of them may now lie hundreds of meters beneath us, hidden not in myth but in geology itself. Consider how landscapes shift. Rivers change course, covering their old beds with soil. Floodplains lift themselves higher with each passing season of silt. Coastal cities become harbours. Harbours become seabeds. Seabeds become cliffs, lifted high above the sea. If a civilization had built its life upon one of these unsteady stages, it would vanish almost entirely, smoothed over by new geography, new growth, new layers. We who live later would never know, because their memory would behave like geology, folded into the great pattern until personal stories become indistinguishable from natural form. Our own world already whispers this to us. Beneath Mexico City lie Aztec temples. Beneath them the earlier cities of Teotihuacan, and beneath those, still older villages. Beneath London, Roman roads lie under modern avenues. Beneath modern Cairo are the footprints of Memphis, and beneath those, others still unnamed. This is civilization's rhythm. The new builds on the old on something older, until memory itself becomes architectural layer. What if this is not a rhythm of millennia only, but of millions of years? How many strata could already conceal the bones of entire worlds? Science gives us tantalizing glimpses. Seismic maps, designed to probe for oil or minerals, reveal ghostly regularities in subsurface layers, strange grids and alignments, almost architectural but more likely explained by faulting or ancient dunes. Yet what if even a few of these grids are not natural? What if beneath our own foundations lies a civilization so deeply erased it survives only as geometry beneath rock? The humbling truth is that we might never recognize it. Our minds look for houses, temples, statues, yet after millions of years none of these would retain their form. They would become lines distorted by tectonics, patterns blurred into stone, eroded into ridges. Civilization beneath civilization may not look like ruins at all. It may look like simple geology until patient eyes notice, until someone dares to ask whether a valley once was a wall, a hill once a mound, a layer of stone once a floor. This perhaps is the most haunting thought, that we are already living on top of something older, walking above forgotten footsteps, carrying out our lives on roofs buried so deep they are mistaken for bedrock itself. We are the inheritors not only of our parents and grandparents, but of strangers we will never know, whose stories were erased but whose worlds still lie silently beneath us. And perhaps we too will become one of those silent layers, our skyscrapers folded under future soils, our voices unheard except in vague anomalies. Civilization is fragile. It is built on forgetting, and yet forgetting has its own architecture, layering, burying, concealing, until what was once vibrant becomes foundation for something new. So when we look upon deserts and forests, mountains and plains, perhaps we should wonder, are these landscapes truly empty, or are they rooftops of civilizations swallowed whole, parts of a cycle older than our records, older than our counting, older than even our imagining. And if every civilization sits unwittingly upon the bones of another, then perhaps even decay has its own geometry, patterns that persist from one collapse into the next, which leads us gently now to the next silence, to the shape of ruins themselves when they dissolve into mathematics, into the strange and secret geometry of decay,